Quiet on the set. Action. Camera. Hello. The date is September the 29th, 2015. And I would like to tell you some of the things that happened to me in my long life. I was born in 1922 in North Philadelphia on a street called Dover Street, which is on the outskirts of Strawberry Mansion. My father was Jacob and my mother was Sarah. They had 3 children. Al, the oldest, and he was 6 years my senior. Then there was Claire, my sister, who was 3 years my senior, and I was the baby. I cried constantly, and the lady next door wanted to sell her house because I made so much noise. I outgrew this, and 6 months later, look how handsome I was. When I was about 12 years old, we moved to Atlantic City, and my dad had a rooming house, and he rented it by the year. Things weren't bad in the summertime. However, in the winter, unfortunately, the heater broke, and there was no water. So I used to go across the street to the Gulf Station and get gallons of water. And my mother and my sister and I lived in this one bedroom for the winter. My dad created a bucket-a-day stove, and that's what gave us heat. This was my bar mitzvah picture that was taken on Vermont Avenue. This is me in the tallis. My father on the left behind is my mother, and that is my Zayda, my father's father. Zayda was my Hebrew teacher, and he taught me my bar mitzvah. This time my dad moved up to a bigger hotel, the Vermont Hotel on Vermont Avenue, and it had around 30 rooms and plenty of public kitchens where everybody cooked for themselves. This is Uncle Ed and his family and my brother on the right. Uncle Ed was my father's youngest brother. This is Ruthie in the middle, Uncle Ed on the left-hand side, Aunt Elizabeth, and my brother Al. He must have been around 19 years old. Al worked for Uncle Ed, and he saved up and he bought me a bicycle for my bar mitzvah, which was a beautiful, beautiful bike, a Schwinn. This is Aunt Bella, my father's sister, who also lived in Atlantic City. This good-looking guy was my Uncle Herman, my father's youngest brother, and this was his gorgeous wife, Ann. This is their son, Bobby, who they called Mr. B. At 14, I got my first job delivering for a tailor, Mr. Benson, on New York Avenue. He paid me about $1 a day, and I did that in the summertime. I worked 5 days a week, and I made about $5. However, I latched on to another job at nighttime, and I delivered racing forms. This paid me also about $1 a night, and I did that on my bicycle. There I was, delivering racing forms at night to the local bars. At 15, I got a job delivering prescriptions for a drugstore, Barsky's Drugstore. Then, as I got older, around 15 and a half, I worked the soda fountain. And then I became the soda jerk. I worked there throughout the high school. However, I had another job, and I'll tell you about that. In my junior year in high school, we had a dance called the Kiwanis Night, and that was on the Steel Pier. It was customary for the fella to give a girl a corsage, and the corsages cost about $1. Well, that was way over my head. However, I met a florist who struck up a deal with me that he would supply me the flowers, the corsages, delivered for 50 cents. and I got $1, so I made 50 cents. Joe Kaytes, the Flower King, on Flowers for Your Date, see Joe Kate. And the reason it was Kait is because when my father came over from the other side, he spelled the name Kait, where the and that was the name that I had while I was in the service and in high school. I went through life like that until at Quaker, where I changed my name because the rest of the family spelled it Kaytes. Senior year, they also had a Kiwanis night dance, and again, you couldn't go unless you had a ticket. Well, there were two seniors that would go together, and they had one extra ticket that I would offer them their corsage at a discount if they would give me the extra ticket that I in turn would sell to people who wanted to go that didn't have a ticket. However, they had to buy a corsage from me. So it was like a double whammy. I made a little profit on the first couple and took their ticket, and I sold the ticket to someone else who had to buy a corsage from me and made up for the extra discount that I had given the first party, the first couple. That was pretty good. They called me the Flower King, and in my book, yearbook, people signed it. It said the first guy was going to make $1 million selling flowers, or the Flower King, or things like that. The gardenia I paid 50 cents for and sold it for $1. The orchid I paid $1.50 and sold it for $3. Not bad, don't you think? This is a picture of the Atlantic City High School that I graduated in 1941. These pictures were taken probably in 1940 or 1941. This was in the heyday of Atlantic City. See how crowded it was. The boardwalk was jammed and everybody got dressed. This was an afternoon stroll on the boardwalk. This is what the Atlantic City boardwalk looked like in its heyday. And this was the Hammett's Pier, Heinz Pier up in the inlet. And this was the famous lighthouse at New Hampshire Avenue. These were rough times then. The Depression was still there, and my sister moved back to Philadelphia, and she stayed with my Uncle Dave and his kids. Uncle and my brother Al moved in with Uncle Ed, who he worked for, and my dad had a hotel at 12th and Sampson. And I came to Philadelphia, and I stayed with my father, and I went to school, NYA school, to learn a trade so I could get a job in the defense factories. Well, I went for a couple of weeks, and I decided to apply for a job, and I got a job at the New York shipyard, and I was a helper. I didn't do much, and when I got there, I stood by the desk. The crew chief said to me, "Stay here, and I'll be back for you." Well, he never came back, and I monkeyed around, and I put the blueprints back. When the mechanics would look at the blueprints, they would just throw them on the table. So for something to do, I put the blueprints away. Well, the crew chief thought I was such a good guy. That was my job for the next 6 months. I did that, and then it was very boring, and I wasn't winning the war that way. So I asked if I could work with a mechanic, which I did. And then I worked 7 days a week, and I worked in the engine group. And all I did was carry the tools. I did no work whatsoever. I'll back up a little. While I was going to NYA school, I got a job at night working for Sunray Drug, which was at Germantown and Venango. And there I was the soda jerk, the night soda jerk. And anything that was, any cakes that were cut, I could take home. So I made sure if my father wanted cherry pie that night, I made sure that the pie was cut, and then I could take it home. And I was taking home all kinds of cakes, apple pie, cherry pie, layer cakes, and my dad had a bonanza. I worked in the shipyard for almost a year, and then in October the 30th, 1942, I enlisted in the Air Force. And that's a whole new story. And in chapter 2, I'll tell you about that.